Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dalia Gebrial. I'm an academic and writer and a contributor at Novara Media. So it's been a weird few years for those of us who consider ourselves progressive, on the left, just interested in a fairer, more just society. We have the rise of the far right on the streets, in elected office. It's felt like the ground beneath our feet has been moving very rapidly. But something in the air has changed in the past few months. With the election of Zoran Mamdani in New York, the groundswell of global solidarity with Palestine, and more recently, the green surge here in Britain, it feels like the door is opening, it's cracked open, and a little bit of light is coming through. And tonight I'm going to be joined by an incredible lineup of speakers to discuss what a movement for justice looks like in 2026 and beyond. I'm going to be joined by two incredible speakers, economist and director of Tax Justice UK, Faiza Shaheen, and the newly elected Green MP for Gorton and Denton, Hannah Spencer. And we're going to be taking stock of the current moment, talking about what a progressive movement needs to do in order to win. So without further ado, let's get on with tonight's programming. Please give a huge welcome to Faiza Shaheen and Hannah Spencer. Now, this is what I want our elected officials and our people in politics to look like. I'm so thrilled to be joined with what I really hope is the future of British politics. It's been a long time coming. Hannah, I'm going to start with you. It's been a real whirlwind. I mean, just not that long ago, you were going about your daily life, you were a plumber, you were a plasterer, and now you've had your first few weeks as an elected official, as an MP. I mean, how has it been? How's it going?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. I can't think of much other ways to describe it. I think because it just has been such a whirlwind, and in some ways that's been quite hard to sort of shift and get my head around, but it's that excitement and that motivation of knowing how quickly things can change for the better. And I think this election was about much more than a sort of 4-week campaign. It was about the work that people have been doing for a really long time to make this happen. But I think it's just given this energy and this feeling of hope and positivity, and knowing that this, we don't have to accept what we're being told is inevitable. We can change it. And that's the bit that's the bit I still sort of can't quite get my head around, because I'm just like, it's incredible, like what we all did together. We all played a part in that. And it's just unbelievable that we built this movement.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was the day before you got elected, I was listening to a podcast that you were on, and the host was talking about how, this could come down to 70 votes. There could be maybe a few hundred votes. What margin did you actually win by?
I mean, it was nearly 5,000 votes. Like, it was huge. It was absolutely huge.
So, I think the message to me there is that we really underestimate ourselves. Like, we really underestimate the fact that there is a world out there. There is a coalition out there that is waiting to be tapped, right?
Yeah, and just that, I think that's what's given me this feeling that I've had going into a place that I almost find it hard to describe. It's like, in a lot of ways, it's worse than I was expecting, because it is just so unlike the world that most of us live in. But that feeling of walking in somewhere and knowing I should be here, and there's no doubt about what happened. There's no doubt about the result, despite whatever people may tell you about cheating and all the rest of it. Like, it was really clear what people wanted, and to have that honour, because it is an honour and we don't take it for granted, but that feeling of I should be in there. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a kind of, and I'm sure you're going to come across this kind of person a lot while you're in Westminster. There's definitely a kind of person who is reared from a very young age to be in politics, whether it's as an elected official, as a political commentator, the head of a think tank. And you both have spoken quite openly about feeling like a bit of an outsider in the world of, let's say, institutional politics. So what has both of your journeys been into politics? Was there a particular moment or experience that radicalized you, or was your journey a little bit more uneven than that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was ever a moment that I wasn't radical. So we was always brought up with this sense of something is deeply wrong in the world. My dad was from the Fiji Islands, and every time he would watch TV and the Queen was on, he would be like, that diamond's from here, and that she should give that back. And he gave us all these incredible people to look up to. You know, he would make us watch Muhammad Ali videos, and you know, just always a sense of empire and the impact of that. So from a really and racial injustice especially. So we were always taught, you know, things about the police and how we should feel and how we should act, but also this very strong sense of we deserve to be here. And I really am very thankful to him. I mean, he left, but for that time that he was there, he really did give us that sense of like, yeah, we are British. They came to our countries. He used to sing the national anthem every day. And so, you know, even now working on the tax system, which is essentially another empire, because we are very much at the heart of the dodgy things that happen in tax, right? So 26% of the world's taxes in total are lost to tax havens. And I think about that's the reason why my family in Pakistan find it so hard to access healthcare. And so there's always been that in our lives. And anyone that knows my sister, Nadia, we're just the same because we just had it implanted in us. And I think also, honestly, being brought up as a Muslim, had just been Ramadan, Eid Mubarak, everyone. And we, I think it was combined with my dad's kind of radical politics with my mum's sense of Islam being socialism. I mean, she wouldn't have described it that way. She didn't think of herself as a socialist, but it's those combinations of like deep-seated values that was put in us from a very young age.
Yeah, and I think for me it was a slower path where I couldn't, like, you almost can't pinpoint like the things. I still struggle because I think it was just such a gradual thing, and a lot of it was when I lived in the constituency of Gorton and Denton. Like, I think I was definitely becoming political then, but not really realising that was what was happening, because I was realising that everything is linked. Like, all the things that I started to question, it all came back to politics and the decisions that are made by people who don't represent us. But it was actually, for me, it was during COVID when I just saw clear as anything. I just saw the people who make the rules break the rules, and yet the vast majority of us were making really extreme sacrifices, and that strong humanity that was there for each other, that we tried our very best to look after each other. And I think when it comes down to it, that is what will always happen, that the people in charge, if they're the wrong people, they will just look after themselves. But the rest of us who make up the majority, like, we generally do stick together and look after each other. And I thought, actually, let's have some more of those people making the decisions. And I think everybody is better off when that happens. And yeah, it was just the inequality of seeing the super, super rich get even richer whilst everybody else really struggled. And I thought, this has got to change. And I actually had a direct involvement in politics. I was doing an apprenticeship at the time, getting my gas qualifications, which I did as an apprenticeship. And I couldn't finish my apprenticeship because the government just had a bit of a loophole in how you finished them. And I got in touch with, I can't remember who someone suggested to get in touch with. It was actually it was Gillian Keegan at the time, who was the minister, I think, for apprenticeships. And someone was like, it's really big, she's going to mention your thing in Parliament. And she got it wrong. Like, she didn't understand what was going on. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, my life is in her hands. Like, I can't finish my qualifications. Like, the housing trust that has trained me up, they can't take me on because I can't finish. There was just this knock-on effect. And I thought, because people they don't know what day of the week it is, let alone knowing what's going on in everyone's lives. And I thought it comes a point where you've got to for me, I was like, I've got to stop just arguing with people on my Instagram comments, and I'm actually, which is easy to get stuck doing, but I thought, no, fuck it, I'm going to get political.
I think it's really interesting that you brought up COVID, because I think COVID, and indeed a lot of the time when a crisis happens, I say we tend to see the best of people and we see the worst of people. You know, the best of people was mutual aid, solidarity, the way that people made sacrifices for one another, for people they don't know. And the worst of us were the people who exploited that crisis to make a huge amount of money. And sort of speaking about the worst of us, there's kind of a received wisdom amongst the media, amongst the political establishment, that the only way that you can beat the far right is to kind of park your tanks on their lawn, is to kind of fight on the territory that they have laid out, to concede on some of these key issues, obviously immigration being a huge one of them. But obviously the headline of your victory, Hannah, was not only that you beat Reform, but that you beat a candidate that Reform had put a lot of resources behind. You know, this was a man who thought he was going to walk in, you know, Matthew Goodwin, for anyone who doesn't know who I'm talking about, he thought he was going to walk it. So from your experience on the doorstep, you know, you knock on someone's door, someone opens it, they tell you they're planning on voting for Reform. What's the first thing that you say to try and bring them round?
I think it's always been from a point of, like, I'm someone who in my life, like my friends and my background, like I know a lot of people with very different political views to mine, and some of the most interesting and informative conversations to me have been the ones where I've just literally listened to someone and asked a few questions, but genuinely been interested in why someone has gone down a path. And it's setting out not with the intention of like winning them over necessarily, or trying to get them to do or think a certain way. It's just purely because I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I wonder what's happened in your life that's kind of led you down that path, or made you really susceptible, as we all can be, to a lot of misinformation. And so at that point, it was always just like, yeah, I'd just ask a few questions and understand why. And usually, like, you do see that humanity in people. Like, you see that they're worried about the same things that I'm really worried about. And straight away, like, you find that you do actually have quite a lot in common with most people. And it was unpicking, I think, some of the fibs they've been told and trying to find that common ground, but then getting to a point where it's like, but we actually have solutions. Like, we actually are trying to come up with ways of fixing things. Like, I get it. We all want a moan. We can all spot the problems in this world, but we need to be at a point where it's the people who are actually genuinely trying to fix things, and in a way that will benefit everybody. And that was often what got people sort of on the same page. But I think as much as anything, like, people just appreciate, like, people who work hard, because that's what the vast majority of people here do. Like, and there's a lot of people who can't, who really are unable to work hard, and who are really struggling and suffering. And that was the clear thing with Reform. Like, they thought they could walk it. They dropped this guy in and they thought it was theirs from the start. And nothing makes me more angry than seeing people assume that entire communities are going to think and act and behave in a certain way or the same way, because we clearly showed that that's not the case. And I think they made a massive mistake in underestimating the humanity of people in our constituency. Yeah.
And, you know, you mentioned that their misinformation. Faiza, I want to bring you in here, because obviously in your work as Director of Tax Justice, you look a lot at how wealth is concentrated in the hands of a very small number of people. And there's increasing evidence that the rise of this new far right is actually being driven by a very small number of very wealthy people. Can you elaborate a little bit for us on that relationship between extreme wealth, media, and the rise of what looks sometimes like a grassroots far right movement, but actually is not?
Yeah, firstly, let me just say, I think Hannah there, because I went to Manchester to get the vote out for her, and I lived in Manchester for a while, so I heard this from a few people. I mean, I think really it's the power of also Hannah as a candidate, that people really like someone to talk to. Anyone that has ever met Matt Goodwin?
I have, and I don't recommend
horrible.
it.
I was on Question Time with him, horrible. And like, also just taking that time, and I know people that were on the doorstep and they were deciding between Reform and Greens, and the main thing that they made them vote Greens was because Hannah, local candidate, clearly is going to listen and speak to people, not just dismiss them. That goes a long way, and there is a real appetite out there for, you know, local candidates that really care and are rooted in those communities. On that connection between the wealthiest, and there's this very disturbing, vicious cycle that we're in now. This concentration of wealth, the billionaires, their wealth is just exponentially growing. How they use tax havens and the rest of it to hide their money, and putting that money into politics where they can see there's an opportunity for politicians to keep the rules or make the rules even more in their favor. So we know that people like this Christopher Hareborn, who lives in Thailand, gave Reform the biggest ever single donation from an individual, £9 million last year, and then just £3 million again a few weeks ago. And there's nothing really to stop that. And even with the new elections bill, that they're not putting a cap on donations, which is absolutely outrageous. And it's really simple. These people are happy to divide us in order to keep their wealth. That's what it is at the end of the day. That is the most pernicious effect of inequality. That is the story of inequality and fascism through history. And it's so important in this moment to have people like Hannah that has, genuinely given us so much hope to break that and to push back. But it's scary. We are in that time of inequality where it's so concentrated now. Like, we could have done a lot more about it 20 years ago. Now we really have to have the people's movement. Otherwise, they've just locked up that's the system.
And I think that question of building a movement is really important. And it sounds simple, but it's quite difficult in many ways, especially in the climate that we're in. Because obviously the far right, they have money, they have a lot of power, but we have people, right? And it's about activating people. And both of you are very, very committed community organizers. You are in your communities, not just around election time, but in between elections as well. You're both local to the places where you ran as a political candidate. But we do know from history that when a progressive movement starts to get on the map and starts to get in the crosshairs, things can get very, very vicious and it can get very, very tough. So what do you think we as a progressive movement need to learn from the past to really prepare for what that might look like in the coming years, especially given that the centre is collapsing? And we know that when the centre collapses, it would rather cleave right than left in terms of from the perspective of the powerful.
Yeah, I think there's nothing more powerful, as you say, than people coming together. And as I became more political, I could really see the issues, I think, with people being very, very critical of each other. And I'm someone who, I've always tried to do the right thing. Like, I don't always necessarily get it right, but I've often found like you can be, the more you say, the more open you are to criticism. And that doesn't mean I'm beyond learning or that I don't need to do better. But that was one difference I could see really obviously between like the left and the right. And I felt like, certainly last year when I became the party spokesperson for migration and refugee support, I felt like, there was I'd say something and there'd always be some sort of criticism, and it was like I'm not looking to get it right at all. I'm not asking everybody to believe in me, but I couldn't. That was quite hard to grapple with because I think a lot of other people would have seen that and thought I'd best not say anything. And I was actually like, I'm going to keep going, and I'm not. I really want to highlight like I'm not beyond like feedback or learning, but I could just see something that happens in this movement that I don't think happens in the right, and that can. Without really realising it, can silence a lot of people because people are quite worried to say something because they're worried about saying the wrong thing. But yeah, I think overall it is just that people power. Like, I think if we can come together, we can accept that like we're not going to agree on everything. Like, even all of us here who might be mostly aligned on a lot of things, like I bet we've all got like really, really strong things that we probably disagree with each other about. But that common ground is the thing that no money can overcome. If we can find that common ground and build on it, like that is what makes us unstoppable. And it is that community organising. And I know that day that you came up to help us when it was like typical Manchester. I don't like to have the stereotype about rain, but it was raining that day. And it was pretty miserable, wasn't it? And I was starting to feel like, I don't know what's going to happen in this election. I don't know. But like, you were there like with this enthusiasm, and every single day people turned up and we were like, we're going to smack. And it was unbelievable. And I used to look at this crowd of like 500 people that turn up in a park on a rainy weekday and think, money cannot buy this. Like, but it only comes from us accepting that we want the same things. We may not disagree 100% on everything. That's fine. But if we're trying and we're out there and we're trying to do our best, we're trying to learn as we go, that's the bit that is powerful, and that's how I think that we'll overcome it. Yeah.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, absolutely agree with the people coming together and the enthusiasm for that. But I think we have to also be I think two things are really important in this moment. We cannot cower. We cannot change positions. We cannot think, oh, we need to triangulate on this. Absolutely not. Being loud and proud in our values and who we support and what we stand for, that has to continue, because people like authenticity. I had similar things when I ran as well, where people like didn't necessarily agree with me on lots of things, but they were like, do you know what? Like, you walk around, I can talk to you. I don't agree with you on this and this, but like, I can see you're a real person and you have strong values. And the other thing is that we've got to find those issues that people really can rally around. And maybe I would say this, but part of the reason I've got this job at Tax Justice is because like in this moment, so many people are like thinking, how am I not able to pay my bills? I work so hard. And how is it these people are getting richer and richer? You know, and they hear these stories of billionaires putting money into the political system, and they don't like that. And at Tax Justice UK, we're surprised often by, actually we have quite a few, it seems, reform type voters that are on our mailing list. So I think there's issues that we should take, and I think this has been part of the success, you know, with Zach and the Greens, is to talk about taxing the rich more, because there's some issues that we can just all agree on.
And so do you feel like that kind of the wealth tax is the kind of concrete thing that diverse coalition can be brought around, essentially?
Yeah, the thing I would say about a wealth tax, because, you know, you often get criticism that it's going to, like, you're saying that it's going to solve it all or it's hard to do. But look, no, of course not. But ultimately, it's something that people understand. For any of us, I was a policy geek, but then I spent a lot of time in the community. When people understand a policy that is just worth so much, people get it. And you can start there. It won't solve inequality, but then you can build off the back of it. And one of the things that, you know, the beauty of having a wealth tax, even if it's 1% or 2%, is that at least we would start actually counting how rich the rich are. We don't even know. The HMRC doesn't even have a team that looks at that. They don't know how many billionaires we have, actually. So this is a really powerful start. It works with the public. It's obviously not where we would end, but, you know, it does have that power. And alongside that, you know, the anger, still, like Panama Papers, people are angry. Why didn't anything happen about that? Tax havens and the connection to tax justice in general, I think is, hugely powerful. And, you know, really the line has come down, right? Tax the super rich or stop the boats. And we really need to be strategic about that.
Yeah, whenever I see Robert Jenrick running around tube stations trying to tell people off, I'm always like, you're trying to go after fare dodgers because you can't go after tax dodgers because that's your bread and butter. But I think that, you know, obviously we know that a wealth tax is popular. 2/3 of the British public are for a wealth tax, but it's not being taken seriously by the political establishment. But there's a lot of things that at some point weren't taken seriously and then became not only serious, but inevitable. I mean, the NHS is one of those things. Brexit is another one of those things. You know, it goes both ways. So what do we need to actually get this over the line? And I'm especially interested to hear what you're going to say, Hannah, because you're about to go and try and get this to happen from the inside, and where it's not going to be as popular as it might be in this room. What do you think the strategy to get this policy that is deeply popular amongst the public, but that the establishment are going to fight tooth and nail against, what do we need to get it over the line?
I think it's more people in elected positions, so at local councils, but especially in Westminster. And we've got a general election that's 3 years away. And I think that is how we increase pressure on the other political parties who often do very well from these very, very rich people. But to me, that is clear, especially after having I'm on my third week now in Parliament and just seeing the system and the place where all these decisions are made and on all of it. I just think the only way really that we will change that is by getting more people who support those policies into those positions. And I think that pressure on other political parties, when they know that they're going to start losing their seats, like we've said this before, like that is what will start to panic them. And each of those MPs are individuals. Like if they can feel that pressure, I think that is how we get change. But I think to get to that point, we have to start looking at organising. Like we've got the local elections coming up in a couple of months. Like that's the next milestone. After that, it'll be next year. And we just keep on building and building and building until 2029. And we get people in through the door who are actually going to bring these policies in. But I think before that, we will see the impacts, because when they start losing seats, as we've seen just from me being in there, like they are really rattled. All of them are rattled by it, because they're now going to have to work harder, but they're also going to start having to listen to people more, which they've got away with not doing for too long. But to me, that is really clearly how we get that change is getting more people elected who are genuinely going to try and make things better.
Yeah, I mean, I just really want as much as possible for people, whenever someone knocks on your door, and they're going to start knocking because they are concerned, even in London, you know, these Labour MPs about losing their seats, is that you say, why aren't you taxing the rich more? Like, they need to hear that. And I know from being in the system that gets fed back up. And so if you hear that specifically on the doorstep, or their teams are hearing that a lot, then they will start pushing for it. Because a lot of these people, especially the new cohort, not really Labour or ideological, you know, so they will go with whatever they think will help them win the vote. The ones higher up, there is a block to a wealth tax, and it's ideological. Of course, they say they're not taking it seriously, but they wouldn't, would they? Because they're more interested in having meetings with Goldman Sachs and Goldman Sachs telling them what they should do on budget policy than they are with normal people. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, that we have to organize and make sure that everyone feels confident in saying these things and making these arguments in their workplace, in their communities.
So let's say, in terms, you know, looking ahead, you know, given that it does feel like there is a little ray of hope peeking through, but there's still a very big mountain to kind of to climb. What are you most concerned about when it comes to the near future of British politics, and what gives you hope?
So for me, it's the misinformation and disinformation and how quickly that can spread. And I was as surprised as anyone about this campaign. I don't think anybody was expecting that. I think if you know me, then you probably know the rumours about me that, one, I'm not a plumber, apparently, or that I'm married to the multimillionaire chief executive of AstraZeneca, which I'm not. But I saw that one so often that I remember seeing someone once saying she's married to the chief executive of Pfizer, and I was like, it's not Pfizer, it's AstraZeneca. And then I was like, it's not even AstraZeneca. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I was like, well, how am I defending a lie? But like anything, like these things just spread like wildfire, and it was so alarming, like how quickly people were believing that, and that really scares me, because I think, and I've had this so many times, people who are just so angry, like screaming at me, like, you're not a plumber, and I think they believe it, like they feel so lied to. But I think, like, I probably have more.
Have a look at your toilet right now. I'll show you.
Please
who
go and get me one. Like, I would love to set the record straight. But like, people really believe it, and they feel like they're being lied to, and they feel like I'm a fraud, and I'm like I said before, like I expect to be scrutinised, I expect to be held accountable and challenged on my views, and I don't mind any of that. But what I do mind is having this image that I then can't challenge, like, and it's been impossible for me to counter what a lot came from online, a lot of bot accounts, but then filtered into local community Facebook groups where people really trust that information. And that was what was alarming. And that really, really scares me, because I don't know how we can really challenge that or stop it going at the speed without a government taking it seriously. And as we've seen, I don't think the Labour government are going to take that seriously. And unfortunately, as I found in my campaign, actually Labour were just as bad as Reform in a lot of ways, I think, which was, yeah, I don't know whether or not people would be surprised by that. But yeah, that's the bit I think that scares me. I think we can overcome it. Again, people going out, having those conversations, that's what we were there to do. People were repeating those lies to people who were activists, but they were able to dismantle that on the doorsteps with people. So we can overcome it, but it's just still such an alarming attack on our democracy that people who have all these vested interests somewhere else and the money to orchestrate this huge campaign online were able to control some of that election in a way that I don't really think that we've ever seen before. So just to finish up, I am a plumber and I'm not married to the multimillionaire chief executive of AstraZeneca. Thank you. If I only say one thing tonight, it's that.
I do have to say I'm so worried about Islamophobia, and I wasn't surprised, but I think we probably should have been more prepared, like what happened the day after you won. You know, even though you'd built this incredible multiracial coalition, you know, across the constituency, it was suddenly sectarianism and the Muslim vote. And, you know, I was there knocking on doors of Muslims, and it was very split actually between Labour and Greens, which I was quite irritated about. And, you know, and I tried to be like, okay, don't just like listen. I was like, Uncle, why are you still voting Labour? And I genuinely was. I just used my best Urdu I'd practiced the weekend before. And And he was like, listen, I want to vote Green, but I'm so worried about reform. And, they keep telling everyone that we don't like white people. And it's not true. My business, he was running a restaurant, is open to everyone. And, there's, and I don't know if you saw, but this woman just got like run over the other day. And it was a horror. And like, it doesn't even really make news. And this woman in a hijab going to the mosque, and someone just like run over at speed. And honestly, being from that community, I'm just really worried about the way in which it's just proliferating. You saw with Sadiq Khan just like praying in Trafalgar Square, which is like, they do all the different festivals there, and the way it's hyped up and the way in which people are using the Muslim community to stir up hate. And it's a really worrying time. And I hear people in my community just say, like, we need a plan B. And I think that's so upsetting. And so, we really need to look to that. But just in terms of hope, like, I just feel also on the flip side, so much hope, because I think so many people have woken up in the last few years, in part because of everything that's happened in Palestine. But I think also what the Greens have done and what you've done, Hannah, has absolutely given people hope. Because it's been a long time since we've had a win. It feels like a long time. And, to know that it's possible and the appetite's out there and we can do it if we do it together, that is just a really beautiful feeling. And I think, that we are getting something right. that is something for us to build on.
I think just to say, yeah, like you everything that you said that people were scared about was confirmed in the days after the election. The way that people spoke about Muslim communities, the accusations of cheating, all these words and stuff that it proved exactly why people were scared. And a lot of people say, like, at what point did you know that you were going to win? And actually, like, felt strong during it, but we never took anything for granted. But the night of the resorts, where I was staying around the corner in the count, I was given instructions to sleep and I couldn't, because the count was overnight, and I had the TV on, like the roll-in coverage. And the minute that the Reform, whoever it was, started switching the language, talking from Muslim communities to Islamists and saying it in such a way like that, and I thought, that's when I knew, because I think you're already switching and manipulating what has happened to use this extreme language and this tarring of everybody in the same brush. And it did. It just confirmed that thing that people are scared about is you've every right to be scared about, because the way that they behaved afterwards just gave a glimpse into what they'd do if they had power.
So we have just under 10 minutes before Hannah has to get on a train, because I'm sure those greyhounds are thinking,
they're waiting
I don't
for
know
me.
what she's got to do that's more important than hanging out with us. And I would, kind of agree with them to an extent. So I'm going to take one round of around 2 to 3 questions, and then we're going to have our panelists answer them as a group, just so that we can get as many questions as possible in the time that we have left. So does anyone have any questions for Hannah? Got one over here.
Hello. Obviously, everything you say today is really heartening. And I think 99% of the room today is very pro-wealth tax. I do worry about the lack of content behind what a wealth tax consists of, how it's implemented. It often also has to be internationally accepted, exit tax, blah, 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 blah. So, like, what are we doing around that?
It's a good question, yeah. Any other questions? I'll make sure I keep the note on that. Where are we? Yeah, over here. Great.
Hi. I have a question about Labour. We all hate Labour. We all fucking hate Labour. But as Faiza kind of said about talking to a Muslim voter and then being worried about voting for the Greens because Reform are knocking on our door, how are we going to combat this narrative that you have to vote Labour, otherwise we're going to get Reform? Because if we're talking honestly, it is a risk to vote Green in lots of constituencies. So how do we change that narrative?
Thank you. So because we have 5 minutes, I think I'm going to stop there and I'm going to throw the questions to our panelists. So we've got actually implementing a wealth tax, particularly the international angle, and we've got how do we stop the idea or undermine the idea that you have to vote Labour to get rid of Reform.
So I'll give you the brief answer and then a slightly longer one. I think we've already proved it. I think we've gone from coming like fourth in the previous election, that was the Greens. That was our 132nd best seat. We came from out of nowhere in theory to show that you don't keep having to vote Labour. So I think at this result, I think that is why there is such a movement behind it, because it is just thrown out this idea that you have to vote Labour to keep reform out.
Yeah, on the wealth tax, I mean, I think one is that these things do obviously need the department, the government department to look into it, but they are designed and running in other countries. I worked in a previous job with the Spanish government. I'm in touch with the Norwegians, and they have implemented those taxes. What they're surprised by is that I send them news clippings from here about the way it's talked about, and the Norwegians were like, but do they think we're stupid? Like, why would we keep this wealth tax if it wasn't making us money? It's obviously making us money. We should absolutely have an exit tax. And we were at Tax Justice UK, and please do go online and join our mailing list. We were pushing for an exit tax along with other organizations in the lead up to the budget. But you should know that this government was heavily lobbied. And people in Rachel Reeves' office told me themselves they were heavily lobbied by the big four accountancy firms, by Goldman Sachs. And they cower to that because they haven't been scared of losing the vote. Of course, there are things that we need to put in place for a wealth tax to work, but we know it can work. We see it work in other countries, and we can learn from their mistakes as well. So, it's not like someone has written the 100-page document how it's going to work from now. But as soon as, and I worked with governments around the world, and what I saw from that is as soon as a politician with power has the political will to do it, it can happen because they have thousands of people in a department working for them. So I don't buy into all this, there's not much there. There's actually, we can make it happen. It can happen if the political will's there. Now, the people's will's there. The difference between the people's will and the political will tells us a lot about the strength of lobbying power.
So we're nearly out of time. Before I let you go back to the
Can I just say it's happy birthday to Dalia?
Oh. It's 33 today. It got Jesus, but I don't think it will get me. Before I let you go, there's hundreds of people in this room today. What is one message you want to leave them with? To have them leave this room with?
Get together, organise, mobilise, find the people and get shit done, because that is what they are terrified of. But we can do that, and we've shown that we can run an election and we can win an election by doing that, and it's by working together and making stuff happen.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And keep going. It's a tough battle. It's a struggle. And stick together, make friends. And remember, there's a beauty in this. There's a joy in being in this community of people that have hope for the future, and just take heart in that and keep going. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking our incredible speakers, Hannah Spencer MP and Faiza Shaheen.